Hello everybody, in this video I will share with you what I consider the 10 toughest bosses in the game Elden Ring. But keep in mind that I already spent more than 600 hours on the game, and of course some bosses were easier and others depends on the build that I used. Also depends if you're using spirit ashes or not, other things that make boss fights easier, in some cases much easier. So in my first playthrough, when I was new to Souls game in general, I did use spirit ashes, not that I actually knew that it would make things easier, just use what's in my disposal. After that, I did a playthrough without actually using spirit ashes at all. That being said, just so you know, some builds make some boss fights much easier compared to other builds. But again, some bosses are just known to be hard, sometimes regardless which build you are actually using. Keep in mind that I'm taking into consideration that everything is viable in the game. Whether you like spirit ashes or not, which make it easier or not, well, it's up to you. If you don't like it, don't use it. But for players who play the game, they can use whatever they like, whatever viable in the game. That being said, I'm going to take all my playthroughs into account, the one that I did with spirit ashes, the one that I did it alone, everything together, and again, I'm just going to share, well, my general opinion, which one is the hardest. For without further ado, let's start my top 10. Remember, this is my top 10, not yours top 10. My top 10 for the hardest bosses in Elden Ring, what I consider the hardest ones. Based on my playthroughs, let's start. Alright, in the 10th place, RADAHN. Well, the boss with RADAHN I actually did the first time with Execute's Decay, which is an incantation, and I was actually able to finish the game relatively quickly. Still, it poses some issues at the first time where I tried to figure out how actually to do it, and I was actually then riding a horse. I discovered this is the best way to do it. If you get the other version, which you can actually ride a horse and actually cast while actually on the horse, it makes it even easier. Later I figured out that when I spawn these teammates, and you can actually go around with your horse and just continue spamming them, they can even just defeat RADAHN by themselves, really. So this is why at the beginning was a bit tough figuring out, but then of course other playthrough, you just walk in the park. Even the first playthrough, it didn't take long, but once you figure this one out, you see that it's very, very easy. Again, just spam those teammates and they will be able to do lots of damage. But again, it took me some time to figure this out, but once you figure this out, it just became easy. Alright, next one is, well, the final boss. And the thing is that with RADAGON, when I did my first playthrough, it took me some time learning the move, but once I realized, you know, that there are only a few moves that you can actually, that really did lots of damage and you can actually dodge them. Second stage wasn't hard to learn as well, and it's actually very predictable, the second stage, and the attacks are very slow, so it wasn't actually very hard to learn how to dodge them. So this fight wasn't too hard for me at all. Now, aside from that, if you bring again, spirit ashes and some of the weapons that you can just stagger bosses fast, it will make the boss fight so easy. So the thing is that only after I finished the game, I realized some of the bosses some consider as tough. But for me, in the first playthrough at least, I used whatever I liked. It was pretty easy. So this is why it's not ranked so up in the list, although for some it might be. Now for me, the GODSKIN duo was an annoying fight, but well controllable. I figured out that I'm just to keep my distance, and again, here we can see me actually in the playthrough where I wanted to do it without any spirit ashes. This is one of the playthroughs where I play as a sorcerer, and again, as long as I stay away, dodge some of the attacks, and I can even kind of stay away behind columns at certain points, take the time, not rush, it becomes not hard at all. But it took me some time again just to kind of learn the fight, especially when I first did it in my first playthrough. But overall, it's not ranked up that up, but still, it's a fight that actually was a bit of nightmarish for me at the beginning. So again, of course, with spirit ashes, it'd be much easier compared to without, but that's true to any boss fight. But again, once I figure out, you know, how to, well, be safe, take my time, keep my distance, I was able to beat it pretty fast. But again, it was a bit of a headache at first. Alright, next one is LORETTA. Well, LORETTA was, well, she's annoying. She's annoying. But again, as long as you learn how to dodge and stay away, well, you're on the safe side. Just need to, again, most of the time you just need to dodge things and actually focus on, again, just dodging her projectile. And when she comes, her attack is pretty slow and it's very easy to dodge it. Especially, by the way, when you come with Spirit Ashes, it becomes much easier. But it took me some time and it was annoying for me. It took me several tries. I kind of screw it up. So yeah, it was an annoying fight. But overall, again, it's not the hardest, but you know, I considered it as one of the hard fights that I had. Alright, next one, 3 Sentinel. Oh, whoa, this was annoying. Oh, I remember this, especially at the first fight. First playthrough. At other playthroughs, I found, of course, ways to really deal massive damage to it. But in my first playthrough, oh my god, how many tries I tried to beat him. Of course, with my build, I play a face strength build, so it was annoying. I need to be relatively close. So it was absolutely devastating. I hate this boss, but eventually, of course, I found out builds that make it much easier. But overall, I consider him a very annoying boss to fight against. I know some of you will be surprised, but Malenia is not in my first. No, actually, my first playthrough, I didn't even consider her hard. She was actually so easy. I just brought a Mimic there. This is, by the way, my first playthrough, and I just destroyed her. I then only realized later that when I went already to other places where people consider her to be like the hardest. But when I just played again, I am not aware of anything. I just played my first playthrough. I didn't read any tutorials, no wikis, and I was able to finish her so fast. So I told myself, well, next, you know, I didn't even consider her hard. But I also consider, of course, other playthroughs as well. Because if it was just my first playthrough, she probably would be ranked very low, because she wasn't hard at all. This is with my strength faith build with the Mimic there. Before, by the way, the Mimic was nerfed. It was just a piece of cake. That's why I didn't even remember her. I just moved on. Later on, I tried her alone, and then I needed to learn how to dodge all her attacks, which before that I didn't even know about. Now, of course, I do other playthroughs and without actually using any Spirit Ashes, then I learn all the crazy moves I can actually do. And even now, I don't consider her to be like the hardest boss, at least not for me. Although, I practice with her quite a lot to learn how to dodge her moves, but once you learn how to dodge a devastating move in the first part and the second part, it becomes much easier. It does take more practice, yes, but again, once I know how to do this, again, the fight isn't hard anymore. So again, when I take everything into consideration based on my playthroughs, again, she's ranked there, but wasn't the hardest for me. And again, even now that I'm doing her solo without actually using any Spirit Ashes, it took me a bit of time to learn, but not too much, and I was able to do well in this fight. Alright, next one is Margott, the Omen King. Here you can see me using the Dragon King's Break Blade, trying to finish him alone without actually using any Spirit Ashes. And I was able to do it again after kind of optimizing a good build for it. But overall, it was annoying for me, and I screw up so many times in this fight. Even by using actually a build that I actually saw that is very strong against him, it was annoying. It took me some time to kind of figure this one out, and once I did, of course, like any boss, of course, things become much easier. But yeah, definitely one of the harder bosses that I fought against with my builds. Alright, next one, Fire Giant. Woo, Fire Giant. At my first playthrough, he was so annoying. It took me so many tries until I was able to beat him. Eventually I beat him, of course. And then I came up with other playthroughs with much stronger builds, which I can really like deal massive damage to him. Again, it all depends on the build, but in general, taking everything into consideration, it was annoying. It was annoying. Eventually I was able to beat him very fast, but and then later in other playthroughs with my Sorcerer build, and I found that, of course, the build that works so well, but the times that it take me and the tries, well, I remember this one as one of the toughest bosses for me in Elden Ring. This is, by the way, when I beat him actually without actually any help, no Spirit Ashes, fighting alone. Alright, for me the second most difficult boss was actually Godfrey. I tried so many times, I've screwed up so many times in this fight, and I brought so many builds. It seems like it took me like forever to finish him with my builds, and well, it was annoying. Of course, when bringing Ashes like Gish or Mimic, it makes the fight much easier because, well, you don't get aggro. But still, of course, I need to learn how to dodge the crazy AoE attacks, and sometimes, especially when you play alone, it closes so fast on you. But eventually, when you learn how to dodge his attacks, you see that it's pretty slow, and his attacks are not hard to dodge. But it took me time It took me time to learn it, and I screwed up so many times in this fight. I don't think like any other fight. It was annoying with different builds that I came. So yeah, but again, if you bring spirit ashes, it will make it much easier, because then you can use, for example, blasphemous blade, and even if you get hit, you can easily just, you know, kill yourself. But this boss fight will be remembered for me one of the most annoying ones. But remember, there's always builds that make things so easy. But for me, it's a combination, trying to use things my first playthrough with everything, others trying to do it alone and learn how to, you know, finish it without actually any help. So taking everything into consideration, it was definitely an annoying one. Alright, in the first place, for me, without a doubt, oh my god, Maleketh. Listen, I tried to do this also alone, and it took me some time to learn, and of course when I did it with Mimic, it was much easier, again, like any boss fight. But this one, once you get the aggro, especially second stage when you find Maleketh, well, if you don't learn how to dodge his attacks, it can destroy you, absolutely destroy you. First stage is pretty easy, just keep your distance, hit from far, especially if you're, by the way, using a range build or using like a sorcerer. But this one, oh my god, especially doing it alone, it took me so many tries until I mastered this fight and was able to do it well. And I felt actually the most satisfaction actually finishing this one, especially alone. But this one caused the most trouble for me, this fight, especially the second stage. First stage, again, you learn it, it's not hard. And the second stage, well, you need to pay attention. So yeah, so overall, these are the ones that I consider the hardest. Of course, there are other bosses which I tried, especially in other playthroughs, to finish them alone, try to master those fights, try to find ways to actually finish them. And they weren't easy, but again, not hard as the other ones. So I guess some bosses are just for some tougher than others, and actually we did a lot, by the way. Some will disagree. Some say, for example, Malenia for them was much easier compared to RADAGON, you know, the last boss. I redid a lot, and I can say that Malenia for me wasn't the hardest, especially when I did my first playthrough. I didn't even remember her as a tough boss. It all depends how you play, your goals in the game. If you just want to kind of challenge yourself, go with just trying to play alone, like you see here, by the way, it's another boss, although I don't consider him as the hardest boss. Again, it did pose a challenge for me, especially when trying it alone. When I was in first playthrough, it was pretty easy. But overall, again, it's very personal, and everybody has their own experience. Of course, there's some general statements you hear, like people saying like this is the toughest boss, and I can agree. Probably if we get statistics, we can see that some bosses just were the hardest for most players. Again, remember, this is based on my own playthroughs, alright? All of them, taking everything in consideration, and of course yours might be different. And I want to hear which boss you consider to be the hardest one. Let me know in the comment section below. And if you haven't subscribed yet, what are you waiting for? Just tap this subscribe button below. See you on the next one. Thanks for watching, everybody. Cheers.